March 14, just after 9 o'clock here on the West Coast in Los Angeles, California. I'm Anthony Davis, and welcome to Backchannel. Lots on the menu today, lots to talk about. We're going to obviously look at Ukraine because it's one of the biggest subjects, but also how China might suddenly be involved. Some talks which have been going kind of well on Friday and Saturday, although I have a feeling that if the winning side would never be keen to negotiate at this stage. You know, I think if Russia wasn't winning, then they might want to, but they seem to be like closing in on Kiev. So we'll look at that. Your messages, of course, you can get in touch in the usual way. Wake up your device, say the word say, and then your message. That's if you have an Echo Show. If you don't have an Echo Show, then you can go to the backchannel.tv chat facility and send me a message using your fingers in the old-fashioned way. And also, famously, you can follow the show on YouTube as well. It's right there. Stacey's joined us. Good morning from Texas. John's here from Arizona. First time on the show, John. Hi, nice to see you. Welcome. We're going to jump straight in with some of the biggest stories making the headlines right around the world. This is as civilians are now leaving Mariupol via humanitarian corridors. And as you know, these corridors were agreed between Russia and Ukraine. And I think there was something like a dozen corridors, and only 5 of them were being honored. Others were being shelled. And so the evacuation of refugees has been, curtailed somewhat, and there's been a lot of fatalities now. But Ukraine's Prime Minister has urged the Council of Europe now to expel Russia from its ranks in what would be an historic first at the human rights body. Addressing parliamentarians from across Europe via video link at an emergency meeting of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe in Strasbourg, they said the right to life is one of the key fundamental rights, and today at the center of Europe, this right is being violated every minute and every second. Ukraine has demanded to be ousted from the Council of Europe, he said, because they could not stay in this single European family where human life is the highest value. Russia announced on Friday it would leave the Council of Europe shortly before it was stripped of its voting rights. But no country has ever been expelled from the human rights body, founded in the ashes of World War II in 1949. I was thinking a lot about human rights on the weekend. I read that Saudi Arabia executed 81 people on Saturday. Like a mass execution of 81 people. Saudi Arabia, who America trades with quite freely. They recently sold $600 million worth of missiles. God, it's just crazy to think that that's the case. Why is it that money is more important than anything? It's just terrifying. Anyway, the Ukrainian Prime Minister criticized the Council of Europe for reinstating Russia's voting rights in 2019 after relations were restored in a decision that attempted to draw a line under the seizure of Crimea in 2014. The decision to bring Russia back showed, they said, a poor understanding by the world of the real threat that Putin's regime is, adding that Europe had chosen the road of pacifying the aggressor rather than defending the values of democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. I was thinking a lot about this morning because I was also reading an article that suggested that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of England, is compromised by the Russians in the same way that Donald Trump was compromised by the Russians. And this is very interesting to me because, it's as if the Russians go for the most obvious character, like the people that you would least expect to be compromised because they're so jovial. The likes of Johnson, the likes of Trump. And so this is what we're dealing with now. We're dealing with leaders around the world who have been manipulated by Russia for so long. Boris Johnson is friends with Russian oligarchs. Oligarchs are compromised by Putin because, of course, he controls them. And then Boris Johnson is undeniably under the control of certain Russian oligarchs. We have Russian oligarchs in England who own the main newspapers, who own the main football team. They have kind of infiltrated the very fabric of British culture. And it was never unusual for me to be in London, walk around and just see the Russian influence in the city. And Russians arriving in big cars to go and do their shopping, or shops being held open for them late at night for the very same reason. After the annexation of Crimea, many governments balked at expelling Russia completely because they did not wish to deny Russians the protection of the European Court of Human Rights. Well, Ukraine could also lose a legal avenue to pursue Russia, but the Prime Minister said that the Kremlin could not hide from the consequences of its actions. We all know that punishment for genocide and terrorism cannot be avoided. He repeated Ukraine's pleas for a no-fly zone that NATO countries have so far refused in a speech that recounted the appalling toll of the war on Ukrainian civilians. You know, I was saying this on Friday a little bit. You know, we're at a point now where there's so much evidence now to suggest that Russia has broken every international law when it comes to safety and security of people, that there is now no coming back for Russia. You know, the chance of Russia being reintroduced into a world community is just not going to happen. And a story is just broken suggesting that the Biden administration is considering expediting the resettlement of Ukrainian refugees with US ties, including family already living here, per a US official, amid growing calls from advocates to do more for the millions of people fleeing war-torn Ukraine. Nearly 3 million people have fled now. You know, nearly 3 million. It's quite something. So anyway, we'll look at this together this morning. And if you want to comment, Correct has joined us. Tina says yes. Thank you, Tina. Welcome. Correct is in Pennsylvania. So if you'd like to join in, you can. If you've got an Echo Show, that's an Echo speaker with a screen on it. Just wake it up, then say, and then your message. So you could say, yes, I agree, or no, you don't, or whatever you want to say. I don't want to influence you. Do whatever you think is right. Obviously, you do whatever you think is right. Volodymyr Zelensky has been due to address the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe earlier today, but pulled out due to unforeseen circumstances and asked the Prime Minister to take his place. The Council of Europe is due to take a decision on Russia's future in the organisation tomorrow. I think they just announced that Zelensky is going to address Congress this afternoon in a virtual communique. As Ukrainian's Prime Minister has warned that the conflict can become a third world war. This is the Ukraine Prime Minister who has been addressing the Council of Europe. Oh, I see, he's already addressing the Council of Europe. He said that Putin has started a full-scale war in the centre of Europe that can become a third world war, and has called again for Council members to approve a no-fly zone over Ukraine to defend all of Europe. So there we go. Stacey says this is not good for anyone. Yeah, and then, I mentioned that the owner of the football club in London, it's Chelsea Football Club, was owned by Roman Abramovich. It's up for sale now. Well, top European Union diplomats have agreed to add Roman Abramovich to a list of Russian billionaires sanctioned. The informal green light to Abramovich's listing came in a meeting on Sunday. Sanctions will be effective only after the publication on the EU's official journal, which usually happens within hours or the day following formal approval. I mean, it's very hard to describe how Russia has really infiltrated most Western democracies now in a way that doesn't seem malicious, buying a football club or buying a newspaper. But the reality is that means they have a controlling stake of power. And Abramovich didn't just buy Chelsea because he loved football. I mean, he undoubtedly loves football. I think I've got that right. I've watched him sitting on the sidelines of a Chelsea match, and he is into it. He loves owning Chelsea. But the point is that this guy is compromised. Just having him there, he is compromised. So this speech is kind of going on at the moment in this European Court, and discussing with the Council of Europe, talking about expelling Russia from its ranks, in which would be historic first at the human rights body. So let's look at a couple of other things that are making the headlines. They're talking about coronavirus, of course, being back. It's been just over 2 years since Donald Trump declared a national emergency in the face of coronavirus that was rapidly spreading across the United States. Now, even as COVID-19 remains a threat, U.S. public health officials and researchers are looking to the next potential pandemic, whether it's influenza, another coronavirus, antimicrobial resistance, or a different health threat entirely, and they hope to build on the progress and avoid the pitfalls of the past 2 years. Do you know what I think would be like one of the biggest pitfalls? It would be when they say there's a new virus in town and people are like, I'm not playing your games anymore. You know, I think like there's enough misinformation out there now that people have just in some way it's almost like there's a fatigue that's set in. And my fear is that if there's another pandemic, there'll be a good percentage of people that just won't play ball. They'll be like, nah. And that's worrying because, you know, this pandemic was bad, but there could be one even worse. Elijah's joined us from Texas. Hello, Elijah. Welcome to Backchannel. Davey and Peter, correct. Tina, Stacy, thank you for spending your morning with us. Stacy says, I'm going to play Paul. Okay. I trust you. Knowledge of how respiratory viruses work and how to battle them has increased exponentially during this outbreak. But at the same time, misinformation about infectious diseases, especially vaccines and treatments, has multiplied, presenting new challenges. Scientists, several of whom have advised Joe Biden, recently released a 136-page roadmap for moving from COVID crisis to what they term the next normal. And these investments, including supporting health workers and strengthening health systems, as well as supporting survivors with long-term symptoms. I do think we've underestimated the importance of conceptualizing long COVID. I mean, it's a serious thing. People who just can't shake the remnants of COVID-19 in their systems, you know? People who are suffering from fatigue, people who are suffering from, brain fog. These things are all genuine considerations if you have had COVID and you've not been able to shake the effects of long COVID. A new disease forecasting center, the Center for Forecasting and Outbreak Analytics, will become part of the US CDC, aiming to prepare for the next big outbreak. And a new bill with strong bipartisan support will create a 9/11-style commission to investigate the COVID response and learn from it. But the US was already thought to be prepared for the next pandemic. In fact, in November 2019, the US was ranked first among 195 countries for pandemic preparedness. And even so, the US response was plagued by failures, including politicization, lack of trust, the individualization of health, and widespread inequality. And one key reason for the failure may have something to do with the fact that would be completely unrelated to public health. Trust, or lack of it, played a major role in the pandemic's scope, according to recent research that examined infection and fatality rates in 177 countries. The researchers sought potential connections to democracy, universal health care, hospital beds, quality of health services, and economic inequality. They said, we were not able to observe a connection between any of those things and how countries actually did, said the lead author of the study and the director of the Global Health Program at the Council on Foreign Relations. Stacey has to go. Thank you, Stacey. Great to see you. Have a good Bible study. You know, this concept of trust or lack of trust when it comes to the coronavirus, that was all born of, Donald Trump at the beginning saying it was the Democrats' new hoax and how it would be gone. And he said it was one person coming from China and it's going to be gone. And he just basically lied every single day. And the information they were giving him, he didn't want to look like he was a failure or look like this could happen on his watch. So he lied. He flat out lied, which is something he did every day anyway. So it wasn't a big change. But, his lies became more and more extravagant. And the ultimate lie was when he said that maybe drinking bleach was a way to kind of get rid of it, or to knock it out with a light, to shine a light from the inside of the body. I mean, this was the man that, 70-odd million people voted for to be the president of the United States, a man who said out loud that drinking bleach or shining a light through the body could maybe... I mean, that was on no authority did he say that. He literally, I think it was some lunatic sent it to him on a piece of paper and he read it. He was desperate to look for anywhere other than the mainstream medical opinion. And even now, the guy is, on another planet. And yet people still seem to want to have this guy in charge. I mean, can you imagine what would have happened now if he was in charge during this war? We would be at war now, there would be American boots on the ground. That's my fear. Building trust can play a critical role in preparing for the next pandemic, along with improving data collection and sharing, biomedical advances like vaccines and treatments, and low-tech solutions like improving ventilation and wearing high-quality masks during respiratory outbreaks. You still wearing your mask? I'm still wearing my mask. I don't go out without my mask on. And I'm seeing fewer and fewer people wearing their masks, and it does not bother me. I'm absolutely not swayed by the views of others. Doesn't bother me, What am I worried about what they're going to think about me? Some of them will be jealous. They'll be like, I'm not entirely convinced this thing has gone away completely. Just saying. I really feel like we, yet again, are almost allowing public opinion to influence policy. So I don't think it was the right time to reduce or remove these mask mandates. I think they should have stayed. But I think it was done because of public pressure. And I think what you'll end up with is just I think you'll just end up with people getting sick again. I mean, the numbers in Europe are spiking again. The coronavirus is back. Never really went away, but if you look at the numbers in Europe, they're spiking. And of course, the US tends to be about a month behind Europe by the time everybody has flown here and brought the new strain with them. So my advice is keep the mask on, because it's going to happen again. The Ebola outbreak that began in 2014 suffered at first from a poor response that prolonged the epidemic. People refused to allow health workers into their homes or refused to go to clinics because they were scared of what a diagnosis would mean. Local leaders promoted miracle cures, some of which were poisonous. As clinical trials for an Ebola vaccine ramped up, it was difficult to find volunteers because of skepticism or outright hostility towards first responders. But then, the response turned a corner, and the U-turn to steady efforts to build confidence in officials, neighbors, and other countries. National governments and other organizations held parades of Ebola survivors to boost confidence in getting tested, seeking treatment, and recovering successfully. Local youth leaders, religious leaders, and other community representatives encouraged participation in the vaccine clinical trials. Anthropologists worked with community representatives to develop burial practices that honored tradition while being less likely to spread the virus. And it was successful, helping end the largest outbreak of Ebola in history. Well, applying these same lessons to COVID could help prevent or address the next big one, which could be even more dangerous. And in all of the investments America makes in preparing for the next big one will help address COVID as well. So I think, don't throw any masks away that you've got lying around at home. You're going to need them. I mean, I think there will be another pandemic. I genuinely believe that. And I think, it was only a matter of time. We got lucky that there was 100 years between the Spanish flu and coronavirus. We got lucky. So, maybe you can let me know what you feel about this. Do you feel like COVID is over, or do you think it's just we're in a lull? Because, like I said, the numbers in Europe are spiking again significantly. I was looking at some photos of Ukraine this morning, and it just looks completely devastated. I mean, the place is absolutely ruined. Such a beautiful city as well, in parts. Really like a very historic and beautiful city. And it's been absolutely bombed to death. And that image of that pregnant woman do you remember, who was taken to another hospital? We saw her on a stretcher. It was very moving. Sadly, she passed away, and so did her child. I mean, that's just devastating, isn't it? It's just too terrible. And I feel like, we are living through this war on television, effectively. We're kind of seeing it play out. And I've said a few times I feel completely helpless, and maybe you do too, But that's the tragedy of war, isn't it? That it is something that is so serious, and it is so devastating, and none of it needed to happen. I mean, all of this could have been dealt with through diplomacy and negotiation, and it just didn't. It escalated so quickly. Putin knew what he wanted. Putin has been wanting to do this for ages. And he found his moment. But I feel very sad about that pregnant woman because, the images of her, she was a beautiful woman. She was, photographed. I think they put her Instagram, her original Instagram, photos of her and her husband, looking forward to having a baby. There was a whole history associated with it. And now, of course, there's this news. So, this is something we can, I guess, I don't know. I guess it's something we should reflect on. I'm not going to talk about it anymore because it's pretty harrowing and devastating. But it's definitely something we should think about for the rest of the morning, at least, if not longer. Okay, let's look at what Zelensky's up to, because he's due to address the US Congress on Wednesday in a couple of days' time. We're into day 19 of the invasion now, with the Kremlin showing no signs of slowing down. Vladimir is going to address Congress on Wednesday. Announcing the address, the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said, "The Congress, our country and the world are in awe of the people of Ukraine who have shown extraordinary courage, resilience and determination in the face of Russia's unprovoked, vicious and illegal war. As war rages on in Ukraine, it's with great respect and admiration for the Ukrainian people that we invite all members of the House and Senate to attend a virtual address to the United States Congress delivered by President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine on Wednesday, March 16 at 9 a.m. The address will only be open to members of Congress, the Democrats say. Congress, meanwhile, is laying it on heavy with the Biden administration. Politico Playbook took note this morning on how even though lawmakers typically let the White House take charge on matters of foreign policy, Republicans and Democrats have joined forces to push for the ban of Russian oil imports and to end Russian trade relations. Well, I guess for a lot of Republican lawmakers, it suits them to ban Russian oil imports because then their own oil, in the case of Joe Manchin and similar, will be preferable. It's more profitable for them to ban Russian oil imports. And now Congress is amping up the pressure when it comes to the issue of the fighter jets in Poland. Zelensky has repeatedly pleaded to his global partners to send aid in the form of fighter jets. Poland has a cache of Soviet-style planes, and last week Polish officials said they were available to Ukraine as soon as the US was ready to make the transfer happen. The US has balked at facilitating this transfer for a number of reasons. They would be coming from a NATO airbase, for one. And over the weekend, Russia warned that it would view any such delivery as an escalation. But Rob Portman, the Republican senator from Ohio, he said that Vladimir Putin had also called sanctions an act of war. So, you could argue that Putin is already mentally prepared for this to go all the way. I do get the feeling that Putin now is in for a penny, in for a pound. I mean, that's a bit of a British expression, but, you know, he's got in with one foot, and now the other foot's getting in, and he's like, well, I might as well just stick at this, you know? Arguably, he gets pleasure from it. The guy is a psychopath and sociopath. You know, he takes pleasure in other people's pain. He cares nothing for his own people, the Russian people. And it reminded me of Trump. You know, Trump kind of cared nothing for the American people and still doesn't, fundamentally. And, you know, cared nothing for the effect of, because you remember, you know, Trump's behavior, his crazy behavior, got an airliner shot down. It was a Russian, was it Russian? No, where was it? Well, I forget where it was. But it was like 214 people on board. And they all died because of, oh, that's right, it was in retaliation to Trump taking out one of these generals and boasting about it. He basically destabilized an entire region. And if you don't have knowledge of the geopolitics, and if you don't understand what's at stake, then you can even say stuff that is going to get people killed. You know, that's my biggest fear. I was going to talk about Zelensky, but I want to move on a little bit and bring it a little bit closer to home, because there's a surveillance program that they've been talking about here. This is what Joe Biden has been talking about. The Biden administration is proposing to expand a controversial surveillance program that tracks the whereabouts of more than 180,000 immigrants awaiting their day in court. But there is little transparency about what data is collected by the private company with an exclusive contract to run the program, or what may happen to that data in the future. In a letter to the Department of Homeland Security, U.S. lawmakers on 23rd of February raised fresh concerns about the Intensive Supervision Appearance Program and the data collection practices of a private company running the effort for the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Do you remember we talked about this a few weeks ago? We talked about, the passport. Was it the passport service? Who was it that was going to use it wasn't even facial recognition. It was basically like a selfie picture, you know? I think it was a selfie pic that was just taken from your webcam. You know, it wasn't even facial recognition. It was literally just a webcam picture. And anyway, I think public pressure kind of put pains to that. Well, now they're talking about this surveillance program that tracks the whereabouts of 180,000 immigrants awaiting their day in court. The software is called SmartLink. It's an app that requires immigrants to use. It's overly broad. It leaves unclear what data the company collects and what it does with that information. A review of BI's publicly available policies, this is the company involved, demonstrations of its products, as well as interviews with former employees and immigrants in the program, revealed that ICE and BI have been issued conflicting information about how often it tracks the location of the people it surveils. That BI's app collects a broad swathe of information on its users, and that BI encourages its law enforcement and government clients to share crime data with each other. They say without sweeping federal laws regulating consumer data, there are few mechanisms to compel BI to share much beyond the basics, and even fewer to limit its ability to collect, store, and share personal data as it wishes. Hi, Catherine. Thank you for joining us. And Jason and Gloria. Anne Kay. And Albert Prince is here from New Jersey with an Echo show. Nice to see you. Welcome. Steve just dropped in from Kentucky. Welcome, Steve. And if you want to get in touch, you can talk to me as well, or you can send me a message. Just go in your web browser to backchannel.tv, and you can send me a message anytime you like, unless you have an Echo show, and then you can just chat. Just wake it up, say, and then your message. I mean, I worry that there is an attitude in America that just because these people are immigrants means that their data is less important, and that their privacy is of less value than Americans' privacy, and that they're awaiting their day in court. They want to get into America, and if the price they have to pay for that is giving some biometric data away, then so be it. I mean, I had to give away my blood to the American government in order to get a green card. I literally had to give like 4 vials of blood and be physically tested. I had to have a full physical. It's a lot. Full physical, yeah. I know, it's crazy. So they're saying as part of the process, DHS officials collect biometric and biographical information, fingerprints, photos, phone numbers, and address in the United States. They run a background check to identify criminals or those who pose a public safety risk. Those who do not report are subject to arrest and potential removal. The Intensive Supervision Appearance Program also allows people who have applied for asylum or have been detained by ICE to go home while they await a hearing in court if they comply with an ICE-prescribed surveillance regime. Among the requirements ICE can impose are ankle monitors, voice message check-ins, and facial recognition check-ins through BI's proprietary smartphone app, SmartLink. ICE told the Congressional Research Service in 2018 that while it continually monitors the location of people wearing an ankle monitor, it's ridiculous, it did not actively monitor the location of people being surveilled through the app and only gathered GPS points during those people's weekly check-ins. But there are indications that BI may be tracking SmartLink users more frequently. SmartLink's single disclaimer in the App Store warns continued use of GPS running in the background can dramatically decrease battery life. Well, I guess you could turn that off and change it to only use while the app is running, So only when you're using the app does the GPS kick in. You do have control of these things, I presume. Immigrants in the program apparently have been instructed by BI employees to always keep their phones on so the company could track them. Jose, who's an immigrant in the program, has been told by BI employees to have his phone with him at all times so BI could locate him. Macarena, another ISAP participant whose name has been changed for this conversation, was told the app was always running and she always had to have her location services on. Several immigrants said they'd been told they could not let their phone batteries die. It's exactly like my ankle monitor, but now it's in my phone, Macarena said about the instructions she received. I mean, that is interesting, isn't it? Because people are very unlikely to go anywhere without their phone, right? I guess the difference is you can turn your phone off and you can't turn your ankle monitor off. I've never worn an ankle monitor, so it's hard to say. If you've worn an ankle monitor, let me know in the chat. Just send me a message with the words ankle monitor yes. Doris has just joined us from Maryland. Maybe you've worn an ankle monitor. Dominic, Noon, Cole, Steve, Catherine, Jason, Gloria, Kate. This is not a serious conversation, by the way. I just want to kind of preface this with the fact that you really don't have to let me know if you've worn an ankle monitor or not. Unless you're desperate to, of course. Or unless it's beeping right now and you're trying to take it off with a screwdriver. BI's policies do not make it clear how long it stores the information or who has access to it, but former case managers there said they were able to access the images and location data that immigrants had uploaded to their app for their weekly check-ins in previous months. Well, that information may be added to the permanent case file the US government keeps on all immigrants, including Julia Mao, Deputy Director of the Immigration Rights Organization. Yes, she said she worries this information could be shared with other agencies or used against the immigrants in the future. I mean, that's a problem, isn't it? That's the big problem. And that's what we're dealing with now. this concept that once the data is in the hands of the authorities, if you committed a crime in the future, then they would have access to that information. So, at what point do you say, well, what my behavior is private. My activity is private. I see that William Hurt died, which I feel is very, I don't know if that's something that you would even know who he is necessarily, but he was one of those actors who's been around for such a long time. He's 71. He won Best Actor for his role in Kiss of the Spider-Woman before 2 more nominations for Broadcast News and Children of a Lesser God. He really was a wonderful actor. His son said, "It's with sadness that the Hurt family mourns the passing of William Hurt, beloved father and Oscar-winning actor. 1 week before his 72nd birthday, he died peacefully among family of natural causes." He was born in 1950, studied theology at university, but turned to acting and enrolled at the Juilliard School in 1972. After a series of stage roles, he won his first major film role in the Ken Russell body horror movie Altered States. Man, Ken Russell. That's a name I haven't heard. Now, that's a name I've not heard in a long time. Ken Russell made he was this crazy British director who was obviously high on LSD for much of his career. He just made some crazy films. He made a film called The Rainbow, I seem to remember, where everybody was naked. I think so. Yeah. Anyway, Ken Russell. That film was called Altered States, which swiftly followed by then sensational erotic thriller Body Heat, in which he starred opposite Kathleen Turner. Body Heat's notoriety made his name, and Hurt became a major star of the 1980s. He featured in a prominent role in the ensemble comedy drama The Big Chill and the spy thriller Gorky Park. And then he was cast in Kiss of the Spider-Woman by the director Hector Babenco. He would make a sensational success of the role in which he played a drag queen cellmate of Raul Julia's leftist revolutionary. That's so weird. I have been reading about Raul Julia for the last 3 days, like non-stop. Like I've become obsessed with Raul Julia. For those who don't know who Raul Julia is, he famously played opposite Angelica Houston in the Addams Family movies from the 90s. Do you remember? He was the dad character. What was his name, that character? Morticia and... Oh, man. I'm not going to Google it. I haven't got the energy. But Raul Julia was he Puerto Rican? He was the first of the mainstream kind of Central American actors not to change his name, not to westernize his name. He because, back then it was difficult to get booked, right? So people would change their names. And he didn't. And he was the most inspirational actor to Central American and South American actors. Raul Julia. He died quite young, sadly, but what a wonderful man. One of the greatest actors. One of the greatest actors. And I've been reading about him a lot. So he was in this film with William Hurt, who played a drag queen in the cell. I need to see that. I never saw that film. So that's Kiss of the Spider-Woman. I really need to see that film. The following year, William Hurt played a teacher in Children of a Lesser God opposite Marlee Matlin, who would go on to be the first deaf winner of an acting Oscar. And I think he later married Marlee Matlin as well. In 1988, he made 3 Oscar nominations in a row for his role as a TV reporter in Broadcast News. And for me, that was, one of the great... I like any film that has got, like, newsrooms or broadcasting or roving reporters, including Anchorman. I just love them, for obvious reasons. It's just so interesting to me to see people portraying these roles and seeing what they think a newsroom looks like. In the 1990s, successful roles appeared elusive, including, among others, mostly with an art house bent. He was in a film called Until the End of the World, another movie called A Couch in New York, and the Carl Franklin directed The One True Thing. In 2005, he had an unexpected success with an atypical role, crime boss Richie Cusack in David Cronenberg's A History of Violence, which garnered him another Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. 3 years later, he made possibly an even more unexpected entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, playing General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, a role he would repeat in Captain America: Civil War, Avengers: Infinity War, and Endgame, and Black Widow. I had no idea he was in those movies. And I love those films. I mean, they're all terrible, obviously, but I love them. Why did I not recognize William Hurt in the Marvel movies? What's wrong with me? In 2009, Matlin published a memoir in which she described physical and emotional abuse by Hurt during their relationship. Hurt later said, "I did and do apologize for any pain I caused." He was married twice, to Mary Beth Hurt from 1971 to 1982 and Heidi Henderson from 1989 to 1992. He also had high-profile relationships with Matlin, Sandra Jennings, and Sandrine Bonnaire. So there we go. So it sounds like he had a bit of a temper as well. So it's often the case with actors. So there we go. That's William Hurt, who's died at the age of 71, and be very interested to see what he looked like in those Marvel movies. I really don't remember seeing him at all, but they're often so made up or dressed up or costumed up or wearing various prosthetics. I think prosthesis is probably the wrong word. I think that might refer to a leg, just a solitary leg, rather than the makeup. Marlene's in Florida. Hi, Marlene. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Backchannel. Bruh is with us. Mike and Roxy. Trenton says hi there. Hi, Trenton. Welcome. Noon has joined us as well, along with Doris and Dominic, and it's great having you all hanging around here. Some of the right-wing propaganda that's been going out on Fox News, celebrating Vladimir Putin, because, the right-wing media really seems to kind of be enjoying what it is that, is going on. I don't know why that is. Why is there an ad running here? There we go. So Tucker Carlson's been basically celebrating Russia and saying, I don't see why Russia's so bad and all this stuff. Anyway, what he doesn't realize, because he's such an idiot, is that Russia then takes these videos of Tucker Carlson talking to the American people and rebroadcasts them on Russian channels. So he's been echoing Russian propaganda about the invasion of Ukraine. And then Putin sends out an instruction to friendly media outlets saying, use more clips of Carlson. Mother Jones said it had obtained memos produced by the Russian Department of Information and Telecommunications Support. One document said it was entitled For Media and Commentators, Recommendations for Coverage of Events on the 3rd of March, which it was said it was given by a contributor to a national Russian media outlet who asked not to be identified. It said the memo included an instruction, it is essential to use as much as possible fragments of broadcasts of the popular Fox News host Tucker Carlson, who sharply criticizes the actions of the United States and NATO, their negative role in unleashing the conflict in Ukraine, and the defiantly provocative behavior from the leadership of the Eastern countries and NATO towards the Russian Federation and towards President Putin personally. The document summed up Carlson's position on the Ukraine war as Russia is only protecting its interests and security, and included a quote, "And how would the US behave if such a situation developed in neighboring Mexico or Canada?" On air last Wednesday, Carlson said testimony by Victor Nuland, a U.S. Undersecretary of State about Ukrainian biological research facilities, had shown Russian claims of U.S. involvement were totally and completely true. Fact checkers said they were not. I mean, this reminds me of this lie that they were spinning about, the lab in Wuhan, saying, the coronavirus was created in a lab. Like, they can't comprehend how things happen organically. So there has to be some kind of evil explanation because they themselves are evil. Tucker Carlson is evil. He hates America. He despises Americans. You can see it in every broadcast. He injects fear and division. It's not what's happening in the real world. Like, America is not the country that he claims it is. They show videos of stuff that is not related to what they're talking about and make these connections and scare people. make Democrats out to be evil and fascist, and it's completely untrue. Well, Russian state TV featured Carlson's take the very next day. And the Russian claim about US participation in biological laboratories in Ukraine was straight out of the old Soviet playbook. But that doesn't mean prominent commentators like Carlson should be so quick to fall for it. Citing another Russian recommendations for coverage memo dated the 10th of March, they said the text advised Russian hosts to relay the message that activities of military biological laboratories with American participation on the territory of Ukraine carried global threats to Russia and Europe. Well, on Sunday, Joe Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, went on TV and said that these claims about biological warfare facilities in Ukraine could indicate Russian willingness to use such weapons. When Russia starts accusing other countries of potentially doing something, it's a good tell that they may be on the cusp of doing it themselves. On Sunday afternoon, Julia Davis, an analyst of Russian media, tweeted a still from Russian state TV showing none other than Tucker Carlson on a screen above a discussion panel. They always follow the Kremlin's directives, Davis wrote, namely to use Tycho Rose clips as often as possible. Tycho Rose was a nickname given by Americans to several women who broadcast Japanese propaganda during the Second World War. So there it is. It's like Fox News has really been responsible, I think, for the, for causing the pandemic to kind of go longer than it should have done. What is happening here? Can you hear what I can hear? Can you hear any commercials running in the background? Or is it just me hearing it? Anyway. No, you can't. I mean, it's good if you can't, because maybe it's just me. No, it is. It's on this news article that I'm reading from. But I could hear it, and I just wondered if you guys could hear it. But I don't think you can. I think it's just in my ears, which is unfortunate. It's quite distracting. So this is something we need to consider. I really don't understand why Fox News is still being carried by cable networks, and the like. I just don't understand why it's not a kind of, if you want it, you have to reach out and go and get it. It's just not. It's just there is so much anti-American sentiment on there that it's so detrimental to kind of real life having that. It just doesn't make sense to me why you would do that. Why would you allow a network to be spreading lies and propaganda to regular people who think it's the news? They say, I'm going to watch the news. Well, don't watch Fox. I mean, I don't know who else you should watch, but I mean, it's just not true. We were talking a little bit about the pandemic earlier, COVID. I want to talk a bit more about that also because, there's this whole movement to get pills into people's homes, if you have some Paxlovid or any of these new pills, these antiviral treatments for COVID. But there's a new initiative to facilitate access to COVID-19 antivirals. They reckon it'll have limited impact and fail to mitigate certain health inequities, according to major pharmacist groups, because pharmacists are restricted from prescribing the pills. Yes, announced in Joe Biden's State of the Union address, the Test to Treat program is meant to address the maddening difficulty of Americans that they've had in accessing COVID-19 treatments. The administration will channel newly increasing stocks of antiviral pills to major retail pharmacies that have in-house clinics, providing one-stop testing and antivirals access. Well, the program, which the administration aims to provide for free in the face of fierce Republican opposition to new COVID-19 spending, is also slated to roll out in Veterans Affairs clinics, community health centres and long-term healthcare facilities. Shana just joined us for the first time from California. Hello, Shana. Welcome. Huckleberry's with us as well. And Marlene is still in Florida. Major participants include some 250 Walgreens stores, 225 Kroger Little Clinics, 1,200 CVS Minute clinics, Clinics in particular are staffed by nurse practitioners and physician assistants, authorized by the FDA, to prescribe the two currently available COVID antivirals, Pfizer's Paxlovid and Merck's Molnupiravir. That's right. Well, in a letter dated 9th of March to Biden calling for pharmacists to be granted authority to prescribe these pills, 14 organizations representing pharmacies and pharmacists insisted Test to Treat's impact will be compromised by the fact that such in-house clinics are relatively limited in number and largely in urban areas. They say, unfortunately, rural and underserved communities are less likely to benefit from your Test to Treat approach because of this limitation. According to the CDC, 90% of Americans live within 5 miles of approximately 60,000 pharmacies. The FDA is blocking us from leveraging the most accessible healthcare provider out there to make sure these patients can get these drugs easily, said a pharmacist in Ohio, senior director of pharmacy practice and quality at the American Society of Health System Pharmacists, which is a signatory to the letter to Biden. As far as expanding access, he said, Test to Treat is not doing a lot. So basically they're saying that the pharmacist needs to be able to prescribe like from stock, from like in the same way that they would prescribe or a doctor would prescribe anything else. They're saying that the pharmacist needs to prescribe. Paxlovid and Molnupiravir are authorized for individuals at high risk or severe COVID-19, in particular unvaccinated people with certain medical conditions. They reckon Paxlovid was 88% effective at preventing hospitalization and death in its clinical trials. Molnupiravir proved just 30% effective. The FDA only authorizes its use when other treatments are unavailable or aren't advised for an individual. Sufficient supply of Paxlovid will be key to Test and Treat. Since late December, the federal government has delivered a woefully inadequate 700,000 Paxlovid courses to states, the bi-weekly allotment increasing from 100,000 in January to 175,000 in March. The administration has claimed it will distribute 1 million courses in March and 2.5 million in April. Well, a Pfizer representative would only state that the company plans to deliver a cumulative 10 million courses by the end of June. The administration has agreed to purchase 20 million courses slated to be delivered by the end of September. I mean, this is the problem, isn't it? That, the politicians will always come up with like grand plans and great ideas. But in reality, they need the support of the pharmaceutical companies in this case, and pharmacies and the rest of the infrastructure, as part of this kind of logistics package to actually get these pills to people. And America, and I keep saying it, America does not have a healthcare system. It doesn't. It has healthcare, but no system. There is no American healthcare system. It is all done on an individual basis. It relies on the individual reaching out. There's no, I come from a country where you are registered with the National Health Service. They track your health. If it's time for an annual physical or a smear test or, a cancer check, like they know that it's time for you to do it and they reach out to you on a national basis. Because your date of birth is in the system and the system knows what you need and when. There is no system here in America. So if you are not registered with a doctor, as most people aren't, they access their healthcare on a kind of pay-to-play basis, you're not being looked after, you're not being cared for. And that's why health is so bad in America. We've got supposedly the best hospitals and the best doctors, and yet only the rich are accessing it. They say prescribing Paxlovid safely can be challenging because it may interact harmfully with other medications, and additionally the FDA advises against providing the treatment to those with severe kidney or liver impairment. Experts have also raised concern about molnupiravir's potential toxicities. It cannot be prescribed to minors, and it's not advised for pregnant women. The pharmacy groups have insisted in their letter to Biden they have the expertise to prescribe these medications. They said the pharmacy-based clinic component to the test and treat plan flaunts patient safety and risks significant negative health outcomes. They argue that by prescribing COVID antivirals at such clinics, providers may endanger patients for whom they lack a comprehensive medical history. Exactly, because there's no American healthcare system. There's just healthcare, and it's completely random. It's a scattergun approach. There is no healthcare here. And yet it's the biggest industry, and it makes the most money, and it simply doesn't work. And COVID is a perfect example of how American healthcare was set up for profit, not for a pandemic. Should we do the US news update, Carla? Yeah, that's a good idea. We have a little podcast that I do. It's 2 minutes long, and it enables you to find out what's happening across the United States. We'll play it for you now. You can download it wherever you can get your podcasts. And here it is. It's Monday, March 14. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US news update. I'm Anthony Davis. Unaccompanied child migrants trying to enter the United States will no longer be denied a chance to seek asylum under new guidance announced by the U.S. health authorities. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, in announcing the change late on Friday night, said that expulsion of unaccompanied non-citizen children is not warranted to protect the public health. The change was announced shortly before a court order was to take effect that would have allowed the Biden administration to expel unaccompanied children seeking asylum under Title 42 authority, which was introduced in March 2020 to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The order remains in place for adults and families traveling with children. Testing and other preventative measures allow children traveling alone to be released to sponsors in the United States, the CDC said. Sponsors are typically family or other close relatives. A federal judge ruled in a lawsuit by the state of Texas that the CDC failed to explain why children traveling alone were exempted from Title 42 and gave the administration a week to appeal. Instead, the CDC lifted the order, but only for unaccompanied children. Meanwhile, US soldiers continued to deploy on Friday to Europe, joining thousands already sent overseas to support NATO allies amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Pentagon has ordered roughly 12,000 total service members from various US bases to Europe, with a couple of thousand more already stationed abroad, shifting to other European countries. Your daily US news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel. There it is. That's the US news update. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. Good morning. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Anthony Davis Show here on Backchannel. You're very welcome to join us and spend your morning with us and spend as long as you have available. You've got me for another hour or so. We're going to have a little look through some of the morning newspapers, which we haven't had a chance to do yet. So let's jump on some of those. I want to look at the Abilene Reporter News out of Texas. They lead with season's greetings. Dublin celebrates St. Patrick's Day early. Yes, this is kind of fun. I mean, why not? Why not? Iran claims responsibility for strike near U.S. consulate in Iraq. Yes, that was something that happened on the weekend. Just when you thought that the war effort was all happening on one side of town, it turns out that over in Iraq there is still violence continuing as Iran claimed responsibility on Sunday for a missile barrage that struck near a sprawling U.S. consulate complex in northern Iraq, saying it was retaliation for an Israeli strike in Syria that killed 2 members of its Revolutionary Guard earlier this week. And also, Representative Cloud's bill would dismantle ATF database on gun sales. There's a Texas congressman who's spearheading legislation he says would slam shut a backdoor effort to establish a federal registry of gun owners, but critics of the measure said it would actually tie the hands of law enforcement when it comes to tracking down people who commit crimes using firearms. Yeah, well, no matter how many shootings that there are, and there's been tens of thousands so far this year, nothing seems to change. Trans order draws backlash. This is on the front of the Austin American-Statesman. It says in the 3 weeks since Governor Greg Abbott ordered state investigators to treat gender-affirming medical care as child abuse, a still expanding backlash has extended from local schools to the White House, embroiling businesses and courts along the way. It says much of the opposition has focused on attacking the governor's directive as dangerous, cruel, and misinformed, as President Joe Biden did by labeling Abbott's action. Dangerous, cruel, and misinformed, and saying it was government overreach at its worst, and accusing Texas leaders of harming families to score political points. I mean, that's what all this is about, isn't it? It's just like short-term scoring of political points, but I don't think people like Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis, they even know what people want. They only know what their people want. And that's not how you win votes in a state. You have to appeal to everybody. And that's how you gain a greater majority. And then finally on the front of the Austin American-Statesman, it says, pandemic takes toll on mental health. Everyone is just exhausted, mentally and physically. Muted. Yeah. I've no idea, Charlie. I wish I could answer that question. I genuinely don't know. I mean, you could have to ask my therapist. I mean, I think I know who I am. But my identity is very much lost in time now. Who are you? Maybe you're saying, how are you? Maybe that's what it is. Maybe your Echo device just misheard. That's probably what it is. Charlie's in Washington. Hello, welcome to Backchannel. You can talk to me, as he has done with the Echo Show device. Herabreen has joined us as well from Germany. Welcome. Charlie, I just mentioned. Gabriel, Crystal, Rochelle, Deborah, Megan, Shana, all hanging out with us here. I'm fine. Thank you very much for asking, Charlie. Who am I? I really don't know. I thought I knew. Like last week, I thought I knew. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, you know something? I don't know anymore. The Fort Worth Star-Telegram has led with racial disparity in substandard housing. I mean, this is just like relentless, isn't it? The poorest people are living in conditions that are not fit for any human. There's a photograph of the ceiling in Letitia Brooks's kitchen, which collapsed after last year's winter storm. She received help to fix the roof, but many problems remain, which she cannot afford to fix. I mean, the place is in just horrendous condition. I mean, I'm tempted just to go there and do it myself. I mean, what's going on? She's had to abandon a bedroom in the home due to problems with the ceiling and a large hole that reveals the ground. Man. Judge's race reveals gap among Tarrant County Republicans. It says the takedown of longtime Fort Worth political titan Betsy Price in the Tarrant County judge's race came easily for Tim O'Hare, a 52-year-old South Lake attorney who hit all the conservative buzzwords in a grassroots campaign that got him nearly 57% of the vote. He'll face off against Democrat Deborah Peoples for the seat come November. The two candidates are polar opposites in policy and platform, giving Price supporters, moderates and independents a distinctive choice for the country's highest position. Price supporters who spoke to the Star-Telegram remain mostly undecided. A political expert in the country's Republican Party said they believe that the country's GOP, or the county GOP, may be able to land on the same page when the time comes, despite a schism and hurt feelings about the campaign. I just feel like the Republicans don't actually have any policies in these places. Name just joined us. Charlie says, do you like kids? I love kids. What are you talking about? I mean, I've actually got kids. No, I actually created kids. I had a fantastic weekend with my children. My daughter's second front tooth is about to fall out. So she's going to be toothless. Toothless is actually like a dragon show that she enjoys watching, so I think she's looking forward to being toothless. So I actually don't like kids. I'll be honest with you. I just like my kids. Is that fair to say? I think liking other people's children is kind of hard. I do my best. I wouldn't be inappropriate or abusive, but given the choice, I'd just rather be with my kids. And I'm sure most parents feel the same. I mean, some people adore children, but the ones that adore children are the ones who often don't have children and can give them back at the end of the day. Oh, I love kids. Could you have one? Oh, I would love one. Do you have one? No, I don't think I It's like, and I have been advising people who are on the fence about having children to be like, really think very seriously about this. In this new world where, the climate is changing and the planet is burning and the people are divided and the war is raging, really think long and hard about this. Why you want to do this. Because we all deserve a fair chance at life, and I know it's all a matter of perspective, but I'm genuinely running out of places on this planet to think to go and hide at. Carla, do you feel safe in England? Do you feel safe there in terms of your proximity to Russia or to Russian ballistic missiles or, China even, or... Do you feel like you're in a safe space? I mean, I'm on the very far west coast of America, so I feel relatively safe, but I'm closer to China than I am to Russia. China could definitely reach out. Although China doesn't quite have the same capability as Russia and America in terms of like a nuclear arsenal. Do you know England has got 184 nuclear weapons, so you'll be fine. 184 compared to 3,000 for the Americans and a little bit more for the Russians. I'm trying not to think that this war is going to escalate. That's what I'm trying not to think. But, I just blame Donald Trump. I can't help it. I really feel like the more I read and the more I study about how he destabilized the entire world, you don't understand the significance of coming out of the Iran nuclear deal and even the Paris Climate Accord. I mean, you don't connect those things with war, but they are all connected because the Paris Climate Accord brings countries together over one issue, which therefore puts people in the same room over other issues. Brittany's just joined us from California. Brittany, big fan of your work. Sorry about your dad and everything. Please, it's all worked out now. There's just a fear, isn't there? There's just a general fear in the back of my mind, which I'm sure we've all experienced in the last 3 or 4 weeks since all this kicked off. That, in Putin, you're dealing with this very unpredictable individual who really doesn't care for human life of any kind. And maybe he'd like to go down in history as the guy who, started the war. Matthias has just joined us as well. Welcome. Because, this is the problem. This is the problem, isn't it? We are dealing with a madman. And this is why Trump didn't realize, because Trump was a Russian asset, he didn't realize that he was being manipulated. And every time he thought that he was having really great conversations with Putin, of course that's what he was led to believe. Of course. The guy told us to drink bleach for coronavirus. He doesn't have an instinct in his body. When he thinks he's getting on with someone, he thinks that is preventing a world war because he's getting on with someone. They're getting on with him. He's not getting on with... No one gets on with Trump. Nobody likes Trump. Trump doesn't have any friends. He doesn't have a single solitary friend. Oh, tell a lie. Jeffrey Epstein. Now deceased. But this is my point. It's like, You know, he's so thick. He literally thinks. By thick, I mean dumb. Thick is a British term. Sorry. Thick in England means dumb. Well, it could be somebody whose time zone is a little affected. Do you know what I mean? That's a thought. Just a thought. It's 10:16 here on the West Coast. I'm Anthony Davis. You've got me for another 45 minutes or so as we continue our conversations about what's going on in the world. But, you know, to be a truly educated, well-read and intelligent geopolitical person is to be a foreign advisor, you know, to be somebody like Alexander Vindman, for example, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who blew the whistle on the Zelensky perfect phone call. I mean, I've been listening to that guy speak recently, and he can talk in he is Ukrainian. The guy is Ukrainian, moved to America as a child and pledged his allegiance to the United States and became, you know, worked at a very high level in, advising the White House. This guy talks about Ukraine in such detail and Russia in such detail. Who was that amazing woman as well that she also got fired by Trump? She was another one who blew the whistle because Maria Yanakova, was that her name? Maria Yanakova? She was amazing, like one of the most incredible minds about Russia and Russia's history and the geopolitics of Russia. And she was working for the American government. She wasn't a spy. She was an American citizen who was born in Russia. Maria Efimova. Is that her name? I'll get her up here. Efimova. I don't think that was her. Yani. I forget her name. Russian US advisor fired. I'll search that and see if I can get her name. What was her name? Anyway, she's still doing the rounds now. You know, she's still, you know. And in fact, Trump fired anybody who was anything to do with Russia, you know, advising. Just fired them all because he was compromised, you know. I mean, the fact that Michael Flynn was like a national security advisor, if you listen to Michael Flynn talk now, the guy is so far down the QAnon rabbit hole. And this was like the main advisor to the government. I mean, it's beggars belief, really, you know? Oh, Yovanovitch, Marie Yovanovitch. That was her name. Marie, not Maria. Marie Yovanovitch. I knew it started with a Y. Yeah, she was the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine and a key witness in President Trump's impeachment proceedings. She said that fellow impeachment witness Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman deserved better after he announced that he was retiring. Vindman confirmed via tweet that he would be retiring after his attorney announced the news. She said, Alex is a decorated combat veteran and has served his country well and honorably, Yovanovitch said. Alex should have received the honor and thanks and recognition of the nation. He deserved better than this. Our country deserved better than this. I mean, she is super smart and one of those people who really is like very much at the, you know, at the top of her game. And again, just dismissed by Trump. Why? You have to keep asking these questions. Why? All of this stuff led up to the invasion. All of this stuff. So anyway, today she's been talking to the news. She's changed her hair a bit, so you might not recognize her if you were to see her on the television. In fact, the last few days she's been talking about it. And I think she dyed her hair red and now she's let it go grey. And she's released a book called Lessons from the Edge. It's a front row seat to the disinformation campaign that ultimately saw her removed from her last overseas post as US ambassador to Ukraine. She entered the Foreign Service in 1986 where diplomats were overwhelmingly the pale male Yale model. She writes she had one boss tell her parents, women don't belong in the foreign service, they can't do the job. It's nice, isn't it? What a lovely thing. Anyway, she had a string of good bosses and some good job opportunities doing the political work she wanted. It was not glamorous. She benefited from one woman in particular, Alison Palmer, who sued the State Department for discrimination and won. In a case of good timing, part of the settlement included allowing 14 female FSOs who'd been placed in the management or consular cones to move to political. Yovanovitch competed for one of the slots and got it. Isn't that interesting? She climbed to the highest ranks in the Foreign Service. She's also honest about the self-doubt that tagged her along the way. Interesting. She was warned by several people that Rudy Giuliani, the former president's personal lawyer, was trying to spin a story that Vice President Biden had acted corruptly when he was the point person for Ukraine during the Obama administration. Giuliani turned his ire on Yovanovitch, saying she was corrupt and she was working against Trump and spreading other lies about her. She said, I was worried that if I opened up about what was happening, even to friends, I would be dismissed as a crazy lady with an enormous ego. Rudy Giuliani, hero of 9/11, was trying to dig up dirt in Ukraine about the former vice president and smear her, she said, because I was getting in the way of his schemes. Finally, it was John Sullivan, then Deputy Secretary of State and now US Ambassador to Russia, who ultimately told her she was being recalled from Ukraine. It was not for cause, but because the disinformation campaign had ultimately been successful. Still, Sullivan put it in terms that she understood. The president had lost confidence in her. It was, she writes, a soul-crushing moment. She learned at that meeting that for over a year, Trump had been calling Pompeo, demanding that she be pulled out of Ukraine. The department was doing it now for her protection, she was told. That's interesting. So Giuliani had told Trump that Yovanovitch was in some way trying to question Giuliani's desire to find dirt on Biden. And so Trump wanted her removed and wanted her out. It's classic mob behavior, isn't it? Looking back on it, she thinks it had more to do with protecting Pompeo and Trump. She said, it's one thing to fire your Secretary of State by tweet, it's something else to do that to a career ambassador. Yovanovitch was subpoenaed and did testify privately and later publicly because she respected Congress's oversight role, regardless of which party was in power, and because she was a non-partisan public servant. People don't understand that, do they? The concept of non-partisan public servants, or even non-partisan journalists. People just don't understand it. They've been led to believe that it's not possible. Hi, Rhonda. Thank you for popping in. Calvin's with us as well, and Mary, and Brittany, and Matthias, and Name, and Hero Brian, Charlie, Gabriel, Crystal, Rochelle, Deborah, Megan, Shana, welcome. Thank you for hanging out with Backchannel. It's 10:24 right now here on the West Coast. Carol's in Texas, literally just popped in for the first time. Welcome, Carol. And Russell as well. Nice to see you. Good morning. Or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Should we talk about Liz Cheney for a moment? Because she's turned to the Democrats to save her hide. Yes. I've got a lot of time for Liz Cheney. You know, she's taking so much flack for choosing to do the right thing, to put freedom and democracy and voting rights and, you know, ahead of partisan politics. It says in 2007, in this blue bastion of one of the reddest states in the country, liberal activists wheeled a giant statue of Dick Cheney through town to protest his star role in the Iraq War before toppling it, Saddam Hussein style, for good measure. Well, 15 years later, his daughter, Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming, is turning to the same rare species in Wyoming, Democrats, to save her House seat, and Trumpist Republicans are doing everything in their power to thwart her. The turnabout for Cheney, one of the more unlikely twists in Republican politics in recent years, in a party that has no shortage of them, will come into sharp relief next week at a gathering at Jackson Center for the Arts. Cheney will speak on a bipartisan panel about defending elections, addressing what should be a welcoming audience amid her running battle with former President Trump over the January 6th sacking of the Capitol. I mean, she is, she's a very brave woman because, I hated her father. I don't mind saying that out loud. I absolutely hated him with a passion because, he was instrumental in so many of the worst policies of the George W. Bush era and before, it goes back to the Reagan government. But Dick Cheney was really the worst. Him and Donald Rumsfeld together, they were just warmongers. And I despise them. And for some reason, I'm very drawn to his daughter. And now Dick Cheney, it seems, compared to this whole kind of Trump, corruption movement, seems like a god in comparison to what's gone on in the last 5 years. The Republican National Committee voted to censure Liz Cheney for her involvement in the ongoing House Select Committee investigation of the January 6th attack. So many people RSVP'd yes that Monday's event was moved to another larger venue. So funny. I really feel like she is public enemy number one. Same with Adam Kinzinger. He's the other one on the January 6th committee. Sadly, he's not going to be running after this term is up. He's decided not to. Liz Cheney is basically one of two Republicans on the January 6th Select Committee investigating the insurrection. So only two Republicans crossed party lines to join. And because the Republicans don't want January 6th investigated, because of course they will be implicated, because it was, a Republican, there was a whole bunch of them, Paul Gosar, Lauren Boebert, all of these lawmakers who were responsible for creating the January 6th violence, in addition to obviously the White House we're hearing about now, who at the White House was involved in this war room that happened the day before. They all saw it coming because they all were planning for it, So Liz Cheney basically was selected by Nancy Pelosi to sit on the January 6th committee to investigate it because they knew that she was somebody, even though she was a Republican, she actually cared about voting rights. She cared about democracy. She cared about the free access to a vote. And she knew about this plot that Donald Trump was preparing with these fake electors to overturn Joe Biden's win. So she is absolutely into this because she cares about the Republic. And the same with Adam Kinzinger, who is a former military person, who is now a congressman and is, very outspoken against Trump because he knows that Trump is a career criminal and basically has ruined the United States. America on the world stage now is looked down upon in a way that it never was before. It was always seen as this kind of mighty nation that which had the greatest operating democracy. And now all of that has gone. All of that has been called into question. And all because the former president said that the election was fake, it was rigged, it was phony, it was not to be trusted, that Dominion voting machines were not to be trusted, that the hand counts were false, that drop boxes were illegal. The whole thing. Imagine having your entire democracy devalued. It's incredible to me. So, this is what we're dealing with now. We're dealing with this kind of imbalance where it's so obvious to me now that the people that are seeking the truth are in the minority. Tina has just popped in. Hi, Tina. Welcome to Daniel and Linda and Theo and Russell as well. Welcome, welcome. Nice to see you. This is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. You've got me for another half an hour, and then your pal Hal will be here. We went into daylight saving time, didn't we? Clocks went forward, so spring forward, fall back is the expression, isn't it? So if you think it's 9:30 in the morning, it's not. It's 10:30. If you think it's 2:30 in the afternoon, it's not. It's 1:30 in the afternoon. Hal will be here at 2 p.m. Eastern. Just so you know. I'm Anthony Davis. We're looking through some of the morning papers, and we're also discussing Liz Cheney, who is turning to Democrats to save her hide at the ballot box. Wouldn't it be amazing if all politicians were like Liz Cheney, in as much as their, party allegiance was less about these kind of staunch extremist views and more about democracy and fairness? She said in a tweet on Sunday that she agreed with a fellow Republican lawmaker who called former President Trump a would-be tyrant. It was Representative Tom Rice who issued the statement on Saturday night after Trump held a rally in the state to support his candidates of choice, including a challenger to Rice. In addition to calling Trump a would-be tyrant, Rice added that the former president was consumed by spite. During a Saturday evening rally in Florence, South Carolina, the 45th president referred to Rice as a total fool. He said, "Right here in the 7th Congressional District, Tom Rice, a disaster. He's respected by no one. He's laughed at in Washington. He was never thought highly of in Washington," said Trump about the GOP lawmaker, who was one of 10 Republicans who voted for impeachment and who voted in favor of a bipartisan January 6th commission. Rice said in December that he regrets not certifying the results of the 2020 presidential election. The South Carolina Republican Party censured Rice for his impeachment vote, saying voting to impeach an outgoing president was a political kick. Yeah, what about what the guy did? What about the fact that he tried to overturn a fair election? So Cheney took to Twitter to say that Rice was right. She said, "Most of our Republican colleagues know this. Their silence enables the danger. Our country needs Republicans to be sane, responsible, and seek the truth." I mean, how is it possible that so many people don't see Trump as a tyrant and they think that he's their savior? How is it that so many people are prepared to overlook the man's crimes? Because there's thousands of them. I mean, it's not as if he just accidentally did one thing, paid off a porn star. Do you remember at the very beginning when he paid Stormy Daniels $140,000 and then pretended he didn't know who she was? I mean, it's we thought that was as big as the scandal was going to get, this kind of extortion. No, tip of the iceberg, tip of the iceberg. And so Trump's behavior with Putin and his, relationship with Ukraine, not sending or holding, he's trying to extort Vladimir Zelensky. I heard him yesterday trying to take credit for sending the javelins. He's heard this word javelins. He remembers the word javelins. It's basically an anti-tank, ground-to-air, surface-to-surface missile. So Trump's heard the word javelin, and then he kind of riffs around the words to try and make it sound like he knows more about it than he does, when he clearly knows nothing about it. And this was after that perfect phone call when he threatened Vladimir Zelensky, saying, "We're not going to send you these weapons that we promised you unless you investigate Joe Biden and his son." And Vladimir Zelensky refused, obviously, because he didn't want to be blackmailed by the president of the United States. He was blackmailed by the president, Vladimir, the guy who's currently the hero of the world, because he's a true fighter. Yesterday he put video about him walking through the town and then going into a hospital and awarding all these individuals these medals, including the doctor that he was showing him around. It was amazing. Meanwhile, Trump lied about going down to help on 9/11. Do you remember? And then phoned into a radio station or a TV station and said, well, now Trump Tower is the tallest building in Manhattan. That's all he cared about. It's just beggars belief that people still follow this guy. You know, the US was committed to sending this stuff. Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for joining us from Florida. Kimberly as well. Welcome. Who is with us? Deborah. And Corey, first time on the show from Indiana. Welcome, Corey. Nice to see you. I just get a sense that maybe people are starting to realize now, not all people, not the kind of the base, the staunch supporters, but some people are starting to see that there are like gaps in Trump's historical knowledge. That some of the stuff he says doesn't come true. And maybe people are starting to realize that they've been, indoctrinated into his thinking when in fact he doesn't have any thinking. The guy is just an idiot. I mean, Trump is very, close with the Koch brothers as well. Well, they're still doing their business in Russia. Netflix has pulled out and McDonald's has pulled out and yet the Koch brothers, and their sprawling conglomerate, they own at least 3 companies that continue to hum along, such as it were in the virtual pariah state. One company owned by Koch, Guardian Glass, operates 2 plants in Russia. As of March 4th, a spokesperson said the employees in Russia remained on the job. 2 others, Molex Connectors, a manufacturer of electronic components sold throughout Russia, and Koch Glitch, which supplies the chemical and petroleum industries with industrial products, have also kept the lights on as others flee, if not for economic or moral reasons, but so as to maintain their reputations. It's interesting, isn't it? Thank you, Corey. Corey's saying yes. I mean, where are we at with all of this? Where are we at with our kind of, what side do you want to be on? It's incredible to me that some people are actually trying to say, well, maybe Putin's not such a bad guy after all. It's like, are you kidding me? Do you know who this guy is? The list of companies continuing to operate in Russia is shrinking by the minute, but dozens of corporations, including multinational manufacturers and hotel chains, are still doing business in the country despite intense public pressure to withdraw over its invasion of Ukraine. McDonald's was among the big-name companies to announce it was closing 850 restaurants in Russia. Coca-Cola and PepsiCo quickly followed suit, as did restaurant chains Burger King, Papa John's, Little Caesars, and others. Why is there a Papa John's and a Little Caesars in Russia? It's just crazy to me. Deutsche Bank on March 11 announced it was winding down its business in Russia. The German financial giant had drawn fire for initially saying it intended to continue some of its activities in the country. The decisions to withdraw or suspend operations come amid warnings by Russian prosecutors that existing companies could see their assets seized and CEOs critical of the government could face arrest. Caterpillar said supply chain disruptions and sanctions for its March 9 decision to suspend operations at its Russia manufacturing facilities. They say we recognize this at a time of incredible uncertainty for our valued employees, and will continue to look for ways to support them. This is the maker of construction and mining equipment. Well, they're going to need Caterpillar equipment in Ukraine to dig mass graves. I was watching video yesterday of a mass grave in Ukraine where these bodies were just being put in one at a time with no identification, in a line, in black body bags. And I was like, whoa, this is the effect of war. Innocent people, completely innocent. They weren't even military people, these were just civilians. And their families will never know where they were buried or what happened to them. They literally will just disappear. This is the effect of Putin and Trump buddying up. This is what happens when you destabilize countries by messing with them and thinking you know what's going on. You know, his ego is so great that he thinks that by befriending people, they're going to stop doing bad things. You know, there's a reason that Putin tried not to do anything for those 4 years, because he basically was in control of America. He had America exactly where he wanted it. He could have done anything he wanted with Americans, because he literally had the president eating out the palm of his hand. They had secret conversations all the time. Do you remember at these summits? They would disappear off into a room and the only person that was there was an interpreter. I want to know what the interpreter knows. More than 30 large companies remain in Russia with significant exposure, according to a running tally. The goal of calling out the companies is to pressure them to work in concert with the US government and its allies that have imposed economic sanctions against Russia. Government sanctions rarely succeed completely alone. They need fairly universal support of the business community to truly paralyze an economy as intended. I mean, Dunkin' Donuts is in Russia. I mean, it's ridiculous. There's 21 branches. I mean, they're based in Massachusetts. What are they thinking? Why is it so important to expand and make profit? Why go into the Russian market? It's kind of funny if you think about it. I don't know. I want to talk about donuts, actually, because my brother sent me a thing yesterday, which I'm really interested to talk to you about. My brother's a little bit obsessed with, like, documentaries that make him cry. It's just the way his emotions are, you know? He just is. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. It's kind of interesting. He's obsessed. My brother's obsessed. Oh, I think he loved the octopus one, yeah. Loved it. Where is it? Anyway, he's found a documentary about donuts. And he's like, everybody needs to see this. The donut thing. Where's it gone? So strange, it seems to have disappeared. Maybe he sent it to me another way. Anyway, it's a documentary. I think it's called The Donut King. Yeah, do you know about The Donut King? Yeah, it's called The Donut King. And basically it's about a Cambodian refugee. His name's Ted Newjoy. And he builds a multi-million-dollar empire by baking America's favorite pastry, the donut. And he basically he brings Cambodians in, like he sponsors Cambodians to come in. And he sponsored hundreds and hundreds of people to come and work. And he gave Cambodian people the keys to the donut industry. So he bought all of these retail outlets. They made great donuts. And any individual, like privately run donut shop that you see in America could be one of his donut shops. Anyway, this documentary came out a couple of years ago. And it basically is the story, you know, fundamentally, it's the story of a one man's, immigration story, his American dream story, you know? And it's beautiful. Anyway, I need to see it. I haven't seen it yet. But it's just interesting to me that I think in the documentary they talk about the fact that Dunkin' Donuts is unable to open in certain towns in America because the Donut King has already got the donuts sewn up for that department. And arguably, Dunkin' Donuts, they don't make great donuts. You know, they're not great donuts. They're mass-produced. You know, there's no love, individuality, you know, into these donuts. And I go to a couple of independent donut places. I try not to eat donuts too much, you know. I like a cronut. Have you had a cronut? Carla, you must have tried a cronut. Do you know about it? It's a mix of a croissant and a donut. And they were selling them in some patisserie in Victoria when I was living there, and there was literally lines around the block. Like it became a thing. It was like a zeitgeist thing. And I can't remember the name of the guy who was the baker. Maybe it was Andre or somebody. He was like a famous baker, and he brought this idea to London of the cronut. And there were lines around the block, and I went like a couple of days after, and I didn't have to get in line, and I bought one of these cronuts. It was delicious. Completely delicious. Are you looking it up? Can you tell me the name of the baker that brought the cronut over and had a store in Victoria next to the coach station that was the origin of the cronut in England? Oh, it might be. What's his name? Yes, that's it. The Ansell Bakery. Yeah, they say it's Belgravia, but it's not. It's Victoria. You know, I could have said I lived in Belgravia, but I definitely didn't. Yes, it was the Ansell Bakery, and he basically created this. I don't know if he created it or he discovered it somewhere, but he brought it to London, and the cronut just blew up. It just blew up. Lines around the block for like several days. I only queue up for Apple products. I don't queue up for donuts / croissants / cronuts. But it was just very interesting to me that this was became a thing. So I need to watch The Donut King, which is this documentary, and I suggest you do too. I think it might be on PBS and elsewhere. But it's kind of amazing that somebody can, you know, be such a pioneer of the donut. I want to talk about a famous female, or not so famous female now, because we always end the show like celebrating Women's History Month. I mean, not every month, but definitely this month. So today we're going to talk about June Almeida, who serves as a role model for determination and innovation, as the person to identify the first human coronavirus. Scientists and people all over the world are indebted to her work. She serves as a role model for determination and innovation. Yes, she identified the first human coronavirus. Scientists and people all over the world are indebted to her. June Daisel Hart was born on October 5th, 1930 in Glasgow, Scotland. Her father, Henry Leonard Hart, drove a bus, and her mother, Jane, worked at a local shop. Growing up in a tenement in Alexandra Park in northeast Glasgow, she excelled in school, but money was always tight. In 1947, she won the top science prize at her school and wanted to continue pursuing a career in science after her high school graduation. However, there was no money to pay for her college tuition, so Almeida took a job to help her parents pay the bills. She started at age 16 as a lab technician in histopathology, which is studying tissue disease at the Glasgow Royal Infirmary. Shortly thereafter, the family moved to London, and Almeida took up the same job at St. Bartholomew's Hospital in the city. She worked diligently at her job, but without a college degree, it was hard to advance. Isn't it amazing that you can do this? She died in 2007, right? So she didn't discover this coronavirus, but she discovered the first coronavirus, you know? In 1954, she married Enrique, or Henry, Almeida, a Venezuelan artist. The marriage ended in divorce. The two had one daughter, and they moved to Canada. And while in Canada, she found more opportunities than in London for someone without a college degree, as it was Canada where her career took off. She took a job as an electron microscopy technician, meaning she used a powerful electron microscope to take photos of specimens for research and diagnosis. At the Ontario Cancer Institute, which is now the Princess Margaret Cancer Centre in Toronto, she made images with her microscope. She acquired the reputation for being an expert in the process. In the 1960s, detecting viruses was painstaking and slow work. Examining a single cell could take hours, and images were grainy and hard to see. But despite this context, Almeida was able to make these images clearly and quickly, and she perfected a technique called negative staining, which helped her find and identify viruses. It's so interesting, isn't it? So after working for years in Canada, a professor, Waterson, a virologist, persuaded Almeida to go back to London in 1964. She started at St Thomas's, then moved with Professor Waterston to the Royal Postgraduate Medical School in 1967. And it was during that time that her career began to blossom. She co-authored many scientific publications, continued identifying and imaging many viruses. In her career, she became the first to visualize the rubella virus, and she provided invaluable research on HIV and hepatitis B, of which she helped identify the structure. She also perfected a technique called immune electron microscopy. Microscopy. And she taught many other virologists her techniques. And it was while she was working in London that she came to the attention of Dr. David Tyrrell, who was a researcher working on the common cold. But he had one sample, B814, that he could not identify. Hearing of Almeida's expertise, he sent her the sample, and using her negative staining technique, she created a sharp, clear picture of the mysterious virus. Not only was she able to clearly see it, but the virus looked familiar to one that she had seen years before. But scientists had rejected her earlier identification, saying that what Almeida identified as a different virus was in fact a blurry image of a flu virus. Almeida was proved right, and in the end, that blurry photo and Tyrrell's B814 virus were the first identified human coronaviruses. She and others called it a coronavirus because each piece of virus looked like a crown, which in Latin is corona. Who knew? So every time you and I have said coronavirus, which is probably a gazillion times in the last 2 years, funnily enough, I had never said it before February 2020. Never mentioned it. Almeida continued to write scientific papers and conduct research on viruses. Due to her contributions, the University of London awarded her a master's degree in 1970 and a Doctor of Science in 1971. She finally had the college degrees that she wanted since high school. Most virology review articles and textbooks contain images of viruses that she produced. Almeida finished her career at the Wellcome Research Laboratories in London, where she worked on vaccines and diagnostics. In 1985, she retired and moved to Bexhill in England with her second husband. Almeida could not stay away from her microscope for long enough, and in late 1980 she returned to St Thomas's as an advisor and applied her expertise to produce some of the first high-quality photos of HIV. She died on the 1st of December 2007 at the age of 77. When a new identified virus first appeared in China in 2019, researchers used Almeida's pioneering work and techniques to identify it as another coronavirus. And while her discovery may have been overlooked during her lifetime, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought the world's attention to Almeida's important work. Without it, things may still be blurry today. Interesting. It's so nice to know that there was somebody who had our backs all those years ago. Corey and Rebecca, thank you for joining us. Pamiro, welcome. Mr. Angle popped in as well. Laurie's in Georgia. Hi, she can see me on the Echo Show. Hayden's here as well, listening out in Colorado. What a pleasure. Kimberly and Who and Deborah, Tina, Daniel, Linda, Theo, Russell, Carol, Rhonda, Calvin, Mary and Brittany and Matthias, thank you for spending your morning with Backchannel or your afternoon, depending on where you're at. I'm Anthony Davis. I'll come back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. Stay with us now, though, for more fun, laughter. You'll be happy ever after with your pal Hal next.